AMP2.tv presents Tell Us Your Business, where you're invited on the air to tell us what makes your business stand out in the community. It's important we hear from you to tell us all we need to know about what you do best. Tell Us Your Business uses the latest radio and television production systems, and all shows can be seen on AMP2.tv. If you have a question for our guest, call 888-565-1470. Now, let's get ready as our guest hits the airwaves and informs us about what we need to know on Tell Us Your Business.
Like this.
Good evening, listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. We're glad that you're here with us, and we have a very special doctor with us today. You are listening to the Balancing in Life Business Show with Norma G, and I'm your host, Norma Guerrero. Today we will be talking about how to prevent dialysis with Dr. David Moskowitz. Hi, Dr. Moskowitz. How are you today?
Very good, Norma G.
Thank you so much for coming. I know that you have a wealth of knowledge, and many of our listeners are going to be interested on how to prevent dialysis, addressing your kidney function, hypertension, and various other medical aspects to your health to help you prevent the possible need for dialysis. If you'd like to listen on your car, you can listen at AM Radio 1470. You can listen on your computer at wwnnradio.com and at AMP2 TV Radio Productions on Facebook. You can also listen in on your iHeart app at AM 1470, WNN. And if you have any questions for myself or for Dr. Moskowitz, you can call us at 188-565-1470. Dr. Moskowitz is a nephrologist, and he majored in chemistry at Harvard College, biochemistry at Merton College, Oxford, and received an MD from the Harvard-MIT Division in Health Sciences and Technology. He trained for 7 years in internal medicine, biochemistry, and nephrology at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, before spending 11 years on the faculty of St. Louis University School of Medicine. Dr. Moskowitz is a pioneer in the field of medical genomics, and he has been recognized for his groundbreaking treatment of diseases associated with the angiotensin 1 converting enzyme, such as chronic renal failure due to hypertension and type 2 diabetes. Since 1994, Dr. Moskowitz has experienced firsthand the clinical effectiveness of knowing a disease-associated gene, the angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE gene. Dr. Moskowitz, that's a mouthful of information.
Moskowitz was bad enough.
Well, yeah, right. And with a K, right? Like you told me on the phone.
Right.
And so I'm just going to kind of open it up to you if you can kind of help explain to the listener who may have hypertension, who may also have some issues with their kidney. You know, what do you want to share with them about what you have found in your practice and in your research?
Well, hypertension and diabetes are pretty much silent diseases. You don't know that you've got them. You don't have symptoms. On the other hand, that's what you die of. 2 out of 3 people in the country die of a heart attack or stroke, which are just exacerbations of the hardening of the arteries that are caused by high blood pressure and diabetes. The problem is that a certain number of people have the added misery of having to go on the kidney machine and get dialysis, or if they're lucky, a kidney transplant, because diabetes and hypertension are the 2 biggest causes of kidney failure in this country and actually in almost every country on earth. And the rates are astounding. Half of diabetics go on dialysis. I just became a diabetic, and I have a 50-50 chance.
Is that the statistics? 50% of people diagnosed with diabetes could potentially end up with dialysis in the latter stages of their life?
Will end up on dialysis, yep.
50%?
Yep, it's 45%, but rounding up, half of diabetics are going to need dialysis. But for hypertensives, which are far more common, so there's like 3 times more hypertensives in the country than diabetics, 60 million versus 20 million.
Okay.
But for hypertensives, the risk is only a third. So it's like 15-16% risk of dialysis. So you've got 50% versus 16%. So in fact, diabetics even though the number of diabetics is 3 times less, the risk is 3 times higher. Diabetes is actually leading hypertension as the cause for kidney failure.
So even though there's more people with hypertension in this country, the chances, though, the probability, though, is greater in those with diabetes.
Right, because diabetes is essentially souped up hypertension. It's atherosclerosis on steroids. Anything that could happen in hypertension happens, just in spades with diabetes.
And now I know that when I did some reading that there's a couple different types of diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. What's the difference between those two?
Well, it's just how they start. So type 1, you're a kid, you're basically around puberty, 10 years old, 12 years old, and you have an autoimmune attack on your pancreas, usually after some virus. Many viruses can do it. Coxsackie virus can do it, but not just one, so you can't immunize against the virus and protect against diabetes. But you don't have insulin, like complete absence of insulin. You need to take insulin from the very beginning.
And that's like a juvenile diabetes?
Juvenile onset.
Yes.
And it's rare. It's actually quite rare. Of the 20 million diabetics, only 5 million are childhood onset or juvenile onset. They have a high sugar for a long time, 25, 30 years. At that point, their kidneys, crap out, basically.
And that's because of long-term use of insulin?
Well, it's because they do exactly the same thing to their kidneys as type 2 diabetics do. Which is still not understood, but which I think is that the high sugar actually activates this ACE enzyme. And so that if you use the right ACE inhibitor at the right dose, I believe you can protect type 1 diabetics against kidney failure just as easily as I've personally seen type 2 diabetics. Because I'm an adult nephrologist, I don't get to handle that many type 1 diabetics. I'm not an endocrinologist. I don't, use pumps and stuff in my practice, so I don't get to see them as much.
The type 1?
The type 1.
You see more of the type 2?
Right. The only diabetics I've ever seen are type 2.
Okay. And so when you use this word genomics, what does that mean exactly?
Well, this is a cool example of genomics. So genomics is what everybody's talking about, precision medicine, that kind of stuff. And genomics has to do with what genes are actually behind the diseases that we have. And we've never known, never in the history of medicine until now, like the next few years, we're going to find out what genes, and we only have 25,000 genes. We don't have any more genes than the Drosophila fruit fly. I mean, we are essentially no more complicated than a fruit fly. So the common diseases that we have contributions by one of these 20,000 genes, 25,000 genes. In fact, it looks like many, many genes contribute to produce a disease. It just so happens that that ACE is a very early step in both high blood pressure and its complications and diabetes and its complications.
Do you mean the use of an ACE inhibitor is a step in the management of it?
Exactly. The earlier the step that you block, the better the clinical effect.
Okay.
So, and the reason for that is because, I used to live in St. Louis, and we had the Mississippi River coming down.
Yeah.
And we had a flood in '93, and it was just awesome how much water was going by. There was no way we could block that water. But if you go up to the headwaters of the Mississippi at Lake Itasca, you can walk over a bridge, which is the actual beginning of of the Mississippi River.
Sure.
And you can block that. I mean, you just put a piece of wood in there and you can block it like, a kid playing in the rainstorm. So that's what we want to do clinically. We want to block disease pathways at the very beginning when there aren't a whole lot of alternative pathways that the disease can go through. The problem with blocking it later, like the equivalent of St. Louis, is by then the amount of chemical change going through the pathway is so great that you couldn't possibly block it in completely enough. And also, there are a lot of parallel pathways that have been activated up above. So even if you block the main channel in St. Louis, there'd be other rivers that you'd have to block as well. In other words, trying to block a disease pathway after it started is hopeless.
So are you trying to say that the time to try and figure out how to block it, or when's the best time to block it, is when you are initially diagnosed with hypertension, or when you're initially diagnosed with diabetes?
Well,
I guess I'm trying to figure out.
You're very sharp. You've totally picked up on this idea of early intervention. So you have to block the earliest genes, and you don't really know until you see the clinical effect whether a gene is early or late in the process. If you get a big effect, it almost tells you that it has to be an early step. And the second thing that you just said has been well known to physicians forever, which is the earlier that we get to intervene, the better the outcome. So if somebody comes to us and they've got late stage diabetes, they've got foot ulcers, they're blind, nobody can do anything.
Sure, that's the end stage of it. So I'm talking about if you're, 45, 50 years old, and you really have no medical condition, or maybe you've just been newly diagnosed with something. Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do I know if I'm the person that this might be appropriate for, going and really specifically finding out if I need this certain type of ACE inhibitor?
Right. So it's a perfect question. We're talking about preventive medicine, which doesn't get done in this country because if you prevent disease, you don't make money off the disease. There's no business model for preventing disease. But let's keep talking about it because that's actually what I like doing.
Sure.
And in fact, my company's called Preventive Nephrology.
Well, because, people make money on the aftercare, on the care that's needed with whether a heart attack, which is what you can get from hypertension, or whether it's foot ulcers and amputation, which can happen from diabetic neuropathy and all that, or, worst case scenario, needing dialysis. Although you could still live and still live life, on dialysis. We don't want to make it out to be the end. But
I do.
Well,
it's terrible. In 3 years, you only, nobody really knew until they collected data. And the U.S. renal data system showed for the first time in 1987, 88, that the average life expectancy on dialysis is only 3 years.
And so people that are maybe end up having a heart attack, or someone that ends up having an amputation because of diabetic complications, what could they have done backing up 5, 10, 15, 20 years to prevent that? If we're going to say how to prevent it, so what can we do, whether it's lifestyle or whether it's medication? Were they not on the right medication?
Yeah, I mean...
I guess I'm trying to...
Right, I'm not a lifestyle believer because, you essentially have to go back to the Stone Age to eat the right lifestyle that will keep you away from having diabetes. The diabetic genotype, actually, this ACE genotype, the reason why it's so common is because it allowed us as a species to survive starvation for the last 50,000 years, or a couple million years, actually. Mm-hmm. So the genotype is more common in West Africa, and that's why African Americans go on the dialysis machine 5 times more than whites. It's more common in Amerindians and Hispanics.
Sure.
And it's called the starvation genotype to get them through calorie, poor times. So it does do good things for you, but if you live past the age of 40, it then, gives you your heart attack and stroke and dialysis.
All right, Dr. Moskowitz, we're going to take a little break right now, and we're going to just go to commercial. Again, you're listening to the Balancing Life and Business with Norma G show, and we're talking to Dr. Moskowitz about how to prevent dialysis. We'll be right back.
From simple sprains to highly complex surgeries, the Orthopedic Center of Palm Beach County has been serving the South Florida community for over 65 years with the finest orthopedic and pediatric care. Our physicians are each experts in their field, providing a complete spectrum of musculoskeletal care from prevention and diagnosis to treatment and rehabilitation for every part of the body in both children and adults. Our doctors are able to perform the most advanced treatment options available, including PRP therapy, stem cell, arthroscopic surgery, and microsurgery. At the Orthopedic Center of Palm Beach County, we are dedicated to providing a comprehensive solution to get you back to your routine as quickly as possible, in the shortest period of time, with the least amount of inconvenience. With 3 beautiful new offices located in Lake Worth, Boynton Beach, and Wellington, we are able to provide much-needed care to families in the South Florida area. Give us a call at 561-967-6500. From our experienced physicians to the most advanced treatment options to our state-of-the-art facilities and excellent support staff, the Orthopedic Center of Palm Beach County is committed to providing you with the very best care. Call us at 561-967-6500 or find us at www.ocpbc.com. You are listening to Tell Us Your Business, where our invited guests share all the knowledge of their business and how important it is what they do in our community. If you want to be part of the conversation, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and tell us what's on your mind. Now, back to Tell Us Your Business.
Welcome back to the Balancing Life and Business Show with Norma G. We are speaking with Dr. David Moskowitz today, and he is talking about how to prevent dialysis and really specifically talking to those of you out there who may have the diagnosis of hypertension or of diabetes. And so, Dr. Moskowitz, if we wanted to contact you, we can contact you here locally at this number, 305-705-9922. And he can be reached at www.genomed.com. That's genomed.com. And his email is dwmoskowitz with a K, Moskowitz, dwmoskowitz at genomed.com. Welcome back. Thank you, Dr. Moskowitz. So before we went to break, we were talking about what we can do. At what point do we contact Dr. Moskowitz in our own personal care to find out if we should be on this ACE inhibitor? And so for him to be able to assess us and diagnose us. And so tell us again, Dr. Moskowitz, what can people be, what should they be asking themselves in order to pick up the phone to want to call you and find out if they'd want to reach you?
So, if I had just been diagnosed with high blood pressure, instead of fighting the diagnosis, I'd be happy because it finally gave me the chance to take quinapril, the ACE inhibitor of choice. So
Quinapril.
Quinapril.
And how do we spell that?
Quinapril. All the ACE inhibitors end in pril, like captopril and enalapril. But quinapril turns out to be the ideal one. It's generic. It's not as cheap as it should be, but hopefully that'll change. But the minute I had hypertension, I would start taking quinapril. The idea being that diabetics just are hypertensives whose pancreases fail 2 decades later. And there's a good chance that taking quinapril early enough may actually put off the failure of their pancreas for an extra 10 or 20 years.
And this quinapril is a different type of ACE inhibitor compared to the other ones?
Yeah, it has to do with the enzyme itself. It's a very, very fascinating enzyme.
And so it's really about the issue of the angiotensin converting enzyme,
right,
is what you're talking about.
Right. These ACE inhibitors, so what the ACE enzyme is a pencil sharpener. It just clips off the last 2 amino acids of a 10 amino acid piece. Angiotensin 1 just has 10 amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. They're like poppets on a necklace. So angiotensin 1 has 10. You put it into ACE like a pencil sharpener. It takes off the last 2, and then you've only got 8 amino acids. That's angiotensin 2. That does all the work.
And so if you retain those 10 instead of 8, that's where you end up with complications? So that's
No, you don't make
it-
angiotensin 2. If you just keep everything like 10 amino acid, angiotensin 1, you live a very long life.
Okay.
If you
okay.
make that angiotensin 2, you open yourself up to basically all common diseases.
And so I guess why do we want to clip off those last 2?
Why does the body want to do it? We don't want to.
I see.
We're
So
gonna
people naturally the body does that, and when the body doesn't do that, that's why we need the ACE inhibitor. Is that what you're saying?
So the body clips off those last 2 amino acids for blood pressure, to retain salt. If you're a kidney and you want to retain salt in water, you use angiotensin 2 to do that. So fairly basic things. Vasoconstriction. So all the bad things that lead to atherosclerosis is caused by the 8 amino acid product of ACE. So if you block that thing with the right ACE inhibitor, you've just got 10 amino acid angiotensin 1 floating around. Your body's happy. You're in a low blood pressure state. You're not going to have insulin resistance, which this angiotensin 2 causes. You may not get diabetes at all. You may not get cancer at all. You may not get emphysema at all. It's incredible how much damage.
And it's called quinapril? Is that what you call it?
Quinapril is the
And
ACE
now, is
inhibitor.
quinapril, is that covered by insurance, by
Oh,
people's
yes, absolutely.
pharmacy plans?
Interestingly, none of the insurance companies. Maybe we can talk about this in the final minutes. But I worked all this out 22 years ago. Nobody's ever heard of it, and the insurance plans won't let you prescribe enough. And this stuff costs too much for people to buy it out of pocket. So part of what we need to do, me, you, and the audience, is make some noise, because the insurance companies including Medicare are basically forcing 300 Americans to die every day unnecessarily on dialysis who could have easily been prevented.
And that's because they're choosing a different ACE inhibitor because it's more it's cheaper for them to use rather than this one that's maybe a little more expensive?
Right. They're suppressing the information. Medicare has absolutely no interest in getting
When you
rid
say
of
they, you're referring to?
the entire healthcare system, because I've asked them all. Starting with Medicare, who pays $35 billion a year for dialysis, they don't want to lose their jobs. It's not their lives on the line. It's mostly black people and Hispanics who die, and poor, and white people. It's not their money. It's taxpayers' money. They just want to keep their jobs. Nephrologists just want to get salaried. Hospitals make $100,000 a year on a dialysis patient for the 3 years they're alive. It is the most expensive, most lucrative condition in all of healthcare, and it just demonstrates the silence, this awful silence for the last 20 years.
Focusing on prevention.
It means that nobody cares about prevention, that any lip service they give to prevention is just hypocritical in the extreme. And in the 20 years since I discovered this, 1 million people have died in the U.S. and at least 10 million
astounding.
worldwide. This is the biggest public health catastrophe that's preventable that nobody even knows about.
And when you say that there's a cost differential, what kind of cost differential do you think we're talking about?
Well, quinapril used to cost 7 cents for a 40 milligram pill. You'd use maybe 4 pills a day, so 28 cents a day.
Okay.
Now, so 30 cents times 30 days is like $9, right? So now it costs something like $150
For a month's supply.
for a month's supply, and people don't have that kind of money.
It's expensive. And so, I think the main thing is that for people to consult with you and to determine. Now, are there other, is there any type of like committee happening within the United States or in the government? Are there other doctors that, feel this way, the way you do as well?
No, I haven't met any. And I actually gave up trying to prevent dialysis in the first world. Nobody in the British National Health Service wants to get rid of dialysis. Nobody in the Canadian National Health Service wants to get rid of dialysis. I went to Peru and tried to convince them. I went to the Philippines. The problem is that nephrologists are always consulted. What do you think of this? And none of them want to lose their livelihood, so they all kill it. But the only place that I've gotten any kind of enthusiasm is the odd country in the third world. So Brazil seems to be interested. Botswana is interested. India has just committed to 2,000 dialysis units, which is half of as many as we have. They're about to spend billions of dollars unnecessarily, and dialysis will bankrupt India, but there are going to be a lot of people making money, the hospitals and the nephrologists. The ISN is leading this public health catastrophe, the International Society of Nephrologists. They wouldn't let me, present my findings 10 or 15 years ago, and instead just had a meeting for how they're going to spread dialysis units to Africa and Asia.
Well, I mean, it definitely sounds like you have a compassion for this medication to want to be able to use it with your patients. And so if you're out there and you have diagnosis of hypertension or hypertension or diabetes, and you're able to look into this with the doctor, you may find that this may be good for you to be able to take this ACE inhibitor. I want to thank you, Dr. Moskowitz, coming today. I would love to talk to you again and talk a little bit more about this kind of little bit of a dilemma that we have here in the United States, that we have here with the healthcare system. And I know that a lot of people out there appreciate prevention, and that if being on the right medication, it may be worth it to them. I mean, so thank you again for coming. You're listening to the Balancing Life and Business Show with Norma G. I want to thank you for listening. We will be back next week. And again, to reach Dr. Moskowitz, you can call him. He wants to take your questions. He will educate you. You can go meet him at his office. His number is 305-705-9922. You can email him at dwmoskowitz@genomed.com. And you can also find him on his website at www.genomed.com. Have a good evening.
This has been Tell Us Your Business, where a special guest comes on every week and tells us what they do. All shows can be seen on amp2.tv, and if you wish to be a guest, call 866-224-5422 and tell us about your business. That's 866-224-5422. This has been an amp2.tv production. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those